Here mé dúirta hiarna den ná néfa chuir fuain chun sinna stúrin ar gníomhara agus neartta grasta bhronna orin ganí de gúirt chun críocha. Ónas gur úte agus ófar ar nila bhríhir agus ar nila ganí festa agus gur tríad a chríoch nófaríd trí Christ our dearna. Direct, we beseech thee, O Lord, our actions by thy holy inspirations and carry them on by thy gracious assistance, that every word and work of ours may always begin from thee and by thee be happily ended, through Christ our Lord. Amen. Before moving to Leaders' Questions announcement, to the House, I wish to announce for your information that 4 members of the Dáil have been elected to the European Parliament, namely Deputy Barry Cowan, Deputy Kathleen Funchion, Deputy Michael McNamara and Deputy Éan O'Riordan. Pursuant to the European Parliament Elections Act, the deputies will cease to be members of the Dáil when they take up their seats at the first sitting of the European Parliament, which is likely to be on the 16th of July. Accordingly, vacancies will then exist in the following constituencies: Lee Shoffaly, Carlow Kilkenny, Clare and Dublin Bay North. Now take Leaders' Questions under Standing Order 36. I'm happy to call Deputy Mary Lou McDonald.
Taoiseach, we have an epidemic in domestic violence. This morning, Women's Aid reports that last year it received its highest level of domestic abuse disclosures in its 50-year history. The figures cited in the organisation's impact report are frightening. More than 40,000 disclosures of abuse against women and children in 2023. That's a jump of 18% on the previous year. Reports of physical abuse increased by 74%, and economic abuse increased by 87%. Emotional and sexual abuse and the scourge of coercive control are the lived experience of far too many women. The report details the horrific violence that women experience at the hands of partners or ex-partners: attacks with weapons, sexual assaults, threats against their life and the lives of children, persistent surveillance, the control of household and family finances. And the consequences for women and children can be catastrophic: mental health crisis, exhaustion and burnout, poverty, homelessness and even miscarriage. The awful reality of women being beaten up, sexually assaulted, physically, mentally, emotionally manipulated and coercively controlled happens behind closed doors. It happens in the place where a woman should be safest, in their home. 266 women have died violently in Ireland since 1996. The majority were killed in their own home, and of the resolved cases, half were killed by someone they knew. Behind every statistic is a real person, a real life. Domestic violence isn't that far from any of us. It can be family, friends, a neighbour, a work colleague. It can be somebody close to you who is perhaps so overwhelmed by fear that they can't speak up. The findings of the Women's Aid report demand that government respond with a level of urgency, pace and ambition to match the scale of the crisis that we face. The third national strategy on domestic, sexual and gender-based violence must be fully resourced, Taoiseach. The Ombudsman for Children must be granted funding to participate in that strategy. The establishment of the dedicated agency on domestic violence is very welcome, but it must be made fit for purpose and have the autonomy to address the crisis effectively. Taoiseach, we need an all-of-society approach to combating domestic violence. We need positive societal change at every level. As an immediate step, government must now solve the deficit in the provision of shelters. The state has failed to meet its refuge provision obligations under the Istanbul Convention. 9 counties still have no shelter, meaning that women and children desperately seeking escape end up staying in or returning to violent and abusive homes. Domestic abuse service providers have been underfunded for decades. So, Taoiseach, now is the time that strategy and investment must turn the tide to ensure that women and children fleeing domestic violence have access to refuge and to the wraparound supports that they need. Lagad Thurscall Women's Aid on Maid Furreg and Chowley a Tá Aun. Ní mór den rialtas gníomhartha a thuairt chun cinn chun aig a thuairt arsa go pránach. Taoiseach, do you accept that the findings of the Women's Aid report highlight the need to ramp up government's response to domestic violence? And will you bring forward an emergency action plan to deliver shelters in those 9 counties where currently there are none?
Thank you. Taoiseach.
I want to thank Deputy McDonald for raising this extraordinarily important issue. Before I answer directly, can I just acknowledge the fact that Minister Eamon Ryan has made the decision to step down as the leader of the Green Party. Obviously, he's played a major leadership role in this coalition. I want to acknowledge that. He's an honest, sincere, dedicated and decent politician. He's a person of substance, a person who's had a positive impact on Irish politics, and I fully respect and understand his reasons. I just want to wish him well. Can I thank Deputy McDonald for raising this extraordinarily important issue? And the answer to your direct question is yes. Yes, we absolutely want to continue to do more in this area. And Minister McEntee is leading a very significant whole of government, and I hope and believe a whole of society response that you rightly call for in relation to this, because the Women's Aid report does make for stark reading. The findings of the report are, quite frankly, appalling, and there is no place in Irish society for violence against women, or indeed for violence against anyone for that matter. And I do want to reassure anyone who's a victim or at risk of domestic or sexual abuse that help does continue to be available. I urge anyone who's in fear or danger due to domestic abuse or any crime to please contact Gardaí as soon as you can do so safely. And yes, and I'll get into the specific issues of yes, there are challenges, and yes, there's a need to do more. But I never, ever, ever want to accidentally even put out a message that people can't seek help in the here and now, right now. Because if you're in danger right now, I know all of us in this House would urge you to seek the support of the Gardaí and others as soon as you can do so safely. We have taken a number of steps aimed at protecting women against such abuse. And I think we have shown that combating all forms of domestic, sexual and gender-based violence is a priority. And this has been reflected in a whole range of actions. For example, we now saw the establishment earlier this year by Minister McEntee of CUAN, our statutory-based domestic, sexual and gender-based violence agency. This is now tasked with coordinating and driving the full implementation of our zero tolerance strategy on domestic, sexual and gender-based violence. The 2024 plan for the strategy has a number of very specific action. It commits to exploring models for the delivery of domestic violence refuge accommodation and identifying opportunities to accelerate delivery to meet this target. So I want to absolutely assure the Deputy and more importantly assure the women of Ireland and the people of Ireland that we are looking at how we can accelerate further delivery of refuge spaces, particularly in the areas where there is a deficit as well. The 2024 implementation plan does set out, as I say, a number of deliverables on refuge spaces by the end of the year. Active planning and engagement is underway for the delivery of 150 additional family refuge units. There's delivery of 8 new family refuge units, ensuring that 25 additional family refuge units are now under construction as well. We're commencing the publication of quarterly reports on progress towards doubling the number of refuge spaces over the lifetime of the strategy with an accessible tracking mechanism so we can all collectively monitor the progress that we want to make. The development of the first 36 refuge units in Wexford, Dundalk and Navan is currently underway, with Wexford expected to be operational by September. In addition, 17 more safe homes were delivered last year and 13 more safe homes are expected to be delivered by the end of this year. Of course, the refuge space is a major issue that we're addressing through the strategy and through the new agency, but in addition to that, so too are new laws. Minister McEntee has introduced legislation which creates new standalone offences of non-fatal strangulation and stalking, and has increased the maximum penalty for assault causing harm, one of the most commonly prosecuted domestic violence related offences, from 5 years to 10 years. We have also seen the highest level of funding provided to service providers working in this area. So we won't rest, I know you won't rest, I know the people of Ireland won't, until we do get to that zero tolerance destination when it comes to domestic, sexual and gender-based violence. I think that's something we can all be united on in this House, and we're eager to work with anybody on any side of this House to make progress in this area.
Thank you, Taoiseach. Deputy McDonald.
Thank you, Karen Corlin. I think we can all agree that the zero tolerance culture and reality is one that we all strive for across Irish society, but I think it is important to acknowledge that we have very, very significant ground to make up. and that for far, far too long, this issue did not have the kind of political priority or social priority that it so rightly deserves. The funding for services is inadequate, Taoiseach. You've cited there an increase. I want to invite you on this day where we hear of the highest level of reports to Women's Aid in their 50 years history to go back again to the drawing board and to really stress test what's necessary for these incredible services that save lives, save women and children, save their lives, that they are properly, adequately resourced. Check, see, talk to the sector, and you will find that that is not the case now. As we speak, Roscommon, Carlow, Cavan, Laois, Leitrim, Longford, Monaghan, Offaly and Sligo have no refuge provision. That's the current position, Taoiseach. I would like a commitment from you and a timeline as to when those 9 counties will have refuge provision. Can you give us a date, a timeline, please, today?
Thank you, Taoiseach.
Thanks very much, Deputy McDonald. So firstly, I do agree with you that this was not a social and a national priority in all aspects of life, including in politics, until, though, people like Minister McEntee prioritised the issue. And we have now seen this become an absolute priority. We've taken very significant assignments of responsibility decisions at government to say that Minister McEntee now coordinates across all of government in relation to domestic, sexual and gender-based violence, because every department has a role to play. And I can absolutely assure you, as I know the sector would as well, the level of engagement that we have with the sector, with the service providers, quite rightly the people you identify as the people that are saving lives and doing incredible work, is intense and frequent and regular, as it should be. The level of funding has risen to service providers has risen from around 20 million a year to around 59 million a year, and I am committing on the floor of the Dáil that it will rise again. In relation to the refuge spaces, I will absolutely send a breakdown note to you on how we intend to address the issues, because I'm going to run out of time, but there is a plan to double the number of refuge places to 280. We have now tasked Kuhn specifically with publishing a quarterly tracking report in relation to how we're going to make progress on that for all to see.
Thank you very much. Deputy Ivana Bacik.
Good Count Corla, and I want to begin, Taoiseach, by acknowledging the resignation today of Deputy Eamon Ryan as leader of the Green Party. I want to wish Eamon and his family well on this momentous personal decision, and wish also Eamon's colleagues in his party, in the Green Party, well. I do also want to acknowledge his immense contribution to public service and to environmentalism. Taoiseach, without a functioning planning system, we have no hope of achieving our climate targets or indeed our housing targets. The Planning and Development Bill, which was heralded, of course, by your government as the solution to chaos in the planning system, is, however, in its current form, incapable of resolving these problems, and there's ample evidence that it will make matters worse. Now, I know that you and Minister O'Brien do wish to reform the planning system, but that's why I'm so confounded by the almost total opposition to any critique of your planning bill, whether from us in opposition, from environmentalists or the construction industry indeed. Instead, the approach is to ram the bill through, guillotining debate, offering just days to consider hundreds of amendments, and relying on unspecified legal advice when legitimate concerns are raised. Taoiseach, in the Examiner newspaper yesterday, Attracta Ivana of the Environmental Law Ireland group recalled the Housing Minister's commitment just in April that the planning bill would be enacted before the summer recess, come hell or high water. Well, Taoiseach, I think many of us would venture that the bill, if passed in its current form, would indeed bring about a sort of planning hell and a flood of delays. Even though the bill is being delayed beyond the summer, despite what the Minister said, we've seen debate guillotined last week, many amendments, including my own, not reached, and it seems it will now be passing through the Seanad with similar undue haste. I know, Taoiseach, you're likely to say in response that we in opposition are always calling for faster delivery of homes and that this bill is one way to ensure that. And it's true, we do want to see action, we do want to see delivery, and we do want to see the homes that our communities need being built. But this legislation, far from facilitating more building, in our view, risks taking our beleaguered planning system and damaging it even more. Now, for example, I've watched the Housing Minister, we all have, we've watched him say time and again that the bill is compliant with the Aarhus Convention, the international agreement which protects the right to public participation. Most recently, last week, this assertion was made more than 24 hours after Minister Ryan's office was warned by the UN Aarhus Convention Compliance Committee that this was not the case, that the bill was not compliant. But nevertheless, Minister O'Brien proceeded, and we saw the guillotine imposed on the debate last week. And when that guillotine took effect, numerous outstanding opposition and indeed government amendments had not been debated, including my own amendments, as I've said. The government amendments, unscrutinised, were automatically incorporated into the flawed bill. And that's really disappointing, Taoiseach, when we see so much work having gone into this massive bill, to see it really be passed in such a hasty fashion and without the opportunity to scrutinise these legitimate concerns. So, Taoiseach, do you accept that the manner in which the bill was passed through this House was reckless? Will you change tack in its process through the Seanad? And can you clarify whether the government was on notice of the warning that the bill was not Aarhus compliant when assertions were made to the contrary by Minister O'Brien last week?
Taoiseach.
Well, thanks very much. Thanks to Deputy Bacik for the question. Thank you for acknowledging the role that Minister Ryan has played as a leader of the party. I'm very conscious that he intends to continue in office, and that's a matter for the soon-to-be new leader of the Green Party in due course, but also continuing to serve his constituents in your own constituency till the next election. But he is a politician of substance and impact, and I know we all understand and respect his decision. Look, in relation to this very important issue around planning, and I accept everybody, I think, is largely engaged in good faith in relation to this. I don't believe the bill has been rushed, though. I genuinely don't. And you've indicated what some of my response is going to be already, so I won't say that in the interest of saving time. But I mean, this is a piece of legislation that has had massive consideration, lengthy consideration, as it should, at the Oireachtas Committee. The committee, chaired by Deputy Stephen Matthews, who's here with us, I think had about 120 hours worth of hearings and at committee stage as well. That is extraordinarily significant, and for people watching this debate and watching leaders' questions, that's quite an unusual length of time at committee stage, as it should be, in terms of trying to get this right as well. The Planning and Development Bill did complete all stages in this House, as deputies know, on the 12th of June, and it will now begin its passage through Seanad era, and I understand it's scheduled to begin in the Seanad on the 27th of June. Obviously, the timing of this is a matter for the Oireachtas, and I know the Seanad will want to give this issue due consideration and tease through various issues as well. We have amended the bill to deal with spurious planning submissions and appeals. I think that's important. Statutory declarations must be submitted with all submissions or objections on planning applications, appeals and judicial reviews stating that it's not being done for the purpose of delaying a development or for receiving a payment. And there's also a ban on requesting a payment for not opposing a development. My understanding is, and I'll have to check exactly when Minister O'Brien found out because I don't know the answer to your specific question, but the Minister is aware of the draft compliance report from the Aarhus Convention Compliance Committee and its comments in relation to the bill. And the bill was drafted to ensure compliance with the Convention. And of course, the Minister is consulting with the Attorney General on the matter. But my understanding is that the Minister is satisfied that the bill was drafted to ensure full compliance with the Aarhus Convention. But of course, there will be an opportunity to engage with the Office of the Attorney General, and no doubt this is something that will be scrutinised further in relation to the Seanad. So it's always a balance when it comes to legislation and how long you give legislation. There's lots of legislation in lots of different areas waiting to get through this House. I do think this bill received a lot of time in the Dáil, a lot of time at the committee, and I think it's now appropriate that it has passed the Dáil and will be considered by the Seanad.
Taoiseach, Deputy Bacik.
Well, Taoiseach, there was extensive consideration at committee stage, that's absolutely right, and I want to commend Deputy Matthews for steering the debate there with such patience and goodwill. But there wasn't ample time in this chamber to debate it at report stage, and that's the point. There were over 800 amendments tabled at report stage. I think we were at about amendment 200 and something when the bill was guillotined last Wednesday night. None of my amendments were reached. And, you know, among the amendments we had put forward for Labour was an amendment to criminalise abuse of the planning process, an amendment which we were glad to see the Minister accept. But the Minister's own amendment, which effectively was seeking to do the same thing, we had substantive points to raise on that amendment. And that's a really important provision, that provision alone, a criminal provision in a bill which hadn't been before the House, hadn't been before the committee at an earlier stage, which we in Labour had initiated, and which we didn't have the chance to debate in this House. And that's quite a serious matter. And then we come to the Aarhus Convention matter. And yes, of course, we'll be ventilating these matters through our Labour senators, and I know others will too. But it's simply not good enough that a bill of this, this import would be rushed through at such speed with those even just those two issues of significance that were incapable of being debated in this House.
You see, look, I suppose this is the honest truth. I mean, you get to the point on any legislative issue where the point of disagreement is just reached. So, I mean, I can absolutely assure you that the Minister... No, but it was, because here's how it was, Deputy Haldane, you're in this House a very long time, because the Minister has been listening to these issues. The government has been listening. We've been listening through a whole variety of fora, through consultation. We've been listening through committee stage. Hang on a second. The committee of the Oireachtas isn't a residents' association. It's an Oireachtas committee of the Dáil. And the Ceann Comhairle can clarify that is where members of Dáil Éireann can go to tease through legislation. It is of the Dáil, just to be clear. The only people who can attend it are members of the Dáil. There was a lot of time there. The Minister considers the issues. You table amendments at committee stage. It's quite often, as is your right, that members of the opposition will table the exact same amendment then or variation of it at report stage. And at some point, the Minister, in such a lengthy piece of legislation that's trying to modernise housing planning so we can get things moving in this country, has to decide to press go. And that's what we've decided to do. We need to progress this legislation. There are people depending on it in terms of the delivery of major infrastructural projects, renewable energy, homes for our young people. And of course, there will now be a further opportunity in Shannon Éireann to consider some of these issues.
Now we move to Deputy Peadar Tobin on behalf of the regional group.
Taoiseach, on the 18th of June 1994, Ireland played Italy in the World Cup match in Giant Stadium. The Irish team astonished the world by defeating the Italians on that day, and most of the country were immersed in celebrations of that shock result. Now, Loughinisland is a small village in County Down, and on the 18th of June 1994, just like practically every small village in the country, people piled into pubs to watch that match. But at 10:10 on that night, two UVF men, wielding Kalashnikovs in boiler suits, went into that pub, fired 25 shots, and killed 6 people and wounded 5 others. Barney Green, 87 years old, Daniel McCrenner, 59 years old, Malcolm Jenkinson, 52 years old, Eamon Byrne, 39 years old, Patrick O'Hare, 35 years old, and Adrian Rogan, 34 years old, were all murdered because they simply frequented a pub that was normally frequented by Catholics, and that they were watching a match where the Republic of Ireland were playing in an international tournament. Now, some people might feel that this is in the past, Taoiseach, but the pain and the hurt and the suffering for those families still go on today, and nobody has been held to account for those murders. Victims, in truth, seem to be the collateral damage of the British dirty war in Ireland. Niall Murphy, a solicitor for the victims, have said that the victims are being let down to this very day because nobody is being held to account for the massacre. He said that Barney Green was the oldest victim of the conflict in the north, but the PSNI and the NOI forced the dying Bridget Green to fight to her last days through the courts for justice for her dead husband. A police ombudsman report in 2016, Dr. Michael Maguire stated, "I have no hesitation in saying collusion was a significant feature of the Loughinisland murders." That report found that the RUC knew the names of the suspects of the killings within 1 day of the massacre, but they delayed in arresting them. The police ombudsman's report also stated that one of the suspects was being run by the RUC as an informant. Now, some may feel, Taoiseach, that this is in the past. But even this weekend, 1,500 people marched in a UVF march in East Belfast in black trousers, white shirts and white ties in East Belfast. These murders are a part of a long list of murders that have happened in the north of Ireland of innocent people. And these murders were carried out, I believe, either by the help of the British state or at least were covered up by the British state. And we know that the British Legacy Act, which was passed, was designed to give amnesty to people who carried out murders, to stop families getting to the truth of what happened to their loved ones. Now, thankfully, your government has brought the British government to the European Court of Human Rights in terms of that horrendous particular bill. I would ask you here today, what progress has been made in the Irish government's case against the British government in relation to this?
Thank you, Deputy. Taoiseach.
I want to thank Deputy Tobin for raising this important issue, and I join with him in completely condemning what happened there, and indeed I think very much agreeing with them on the point that just because there's a passage of time doesn't mean that issues can be ignored, and doesn't mean that an approach can be taken to any issue that isn't victim-centred and isn't centred in terms of justice, truth and accountability. And I think all parties in this House, and certainly all parties in Northern Ireland, which is a rare enough event, have rightly come together to condemn and oppose the Legacy Act that has been introduced by the British government, because we don't believe it is compliant with agreements that have been reached between the political parties and the governments of Ireland and the UK, because we don't believe it is victim-centred, because it is opposed by every victims' rights group in Northern Ireland, and as I say, it's been opposed by all of the political parties. I think it represents a significant deviation from the approach that has been taken through a whole range of agreements over many years. It was with regret that the Irish government took the decision that we needed to take an interstate case against the United Kingdom. We didn't do that lightly, and we didn't do it without exhausting all of the avenues that were available, diplomatic, political, raising this at British-Irish councils and all of the other places that you'd expect government and government representatives to raise it. But the British government mind was set, and the papers have been lodged. My understanding, and I just don't have my note to hand on it, but my understanding is now that the court is in the first instance considering the case and its admissibility, and then we'll obviously decide on that and how best to proceed. I am conscious there is a British general election on. I'm conscious of not cutting across that, but I'm also aware that there is different views in relation to political parties in the United Kingdom and Britain on this matter as well. But for our part as a government, and I appreciate on this basis all parties here in this Dáil, we will continue to speak out and speak up for victims, for survivors, for the need for justice, for truth, for reconciliation, and for any approach to legacy to be one that has the support of political parties in Northern Ireland, that is compliant with human rights law, and also has the confidence of victims' representative groups and others. And we will take every opportunity, Deputy Tobin, to continue to make that case. I intend to meet with the British Prime Minister after the result of the UK election. I hope to be in a position to do that in July, and this is one of the many issues that I wish to discuss.
Taoiseach, I think you're correct in saying that the rule of law is a key part of any country being a liberal democracy and part of the international community. But there are still key questions in relation to the rule of law in the north of Ireland. So June is also the anniversary of the death of Noah Donohoe, for example. 3 years ago, Noah Donohoe, a 14-year-old boy, was found dead in a storm drain in Belfast. The PSNI called off the search for Noah Donohoe within 24 hours of the boy going missing. CCTV footage taken 14 hours before Noah went missing was actually withheld from the family for 2 years, inexplicably. And we have a situation where we're not sure even when the coroner's office received that CCTV footage. The Northern Secretary issued a public interest immunity certificate, which allows for whole chunks of the information around that case to be redacted. And the Donohoe family have made 3 complaints to the PSNI Ombudsman in relation to that investigation. Now, I would say, as a co-guarantor of the Good Friday Agreement and as a supporter of the rule of law, I think the Irish government have a role to play in making sure that the family of Noah Donohoe have justice, that at least the process of justice is delivered properly and by the rule of law, and that there are major questions of whether or not the British government are delivering justice and truth and fairness in their investigations into the death of Noah Donohoe. And I'd ask you to make representations to the British government to make sure that that's actually happening.
Please.
Look, thanks, Concordia, and thanks to Deputy Tobin for raising the issue of Noah Donohoe. My thoughts are with the family. I'm reluctant to talk too much about any one individual case, and I am conscious of the processes, the independence of the PSNI from political interference, as you'd expect, just like on Garda Síochána here in this jurisdiction. But of course, I'm always happy to and eager to hear from families and hear from people who have concerns in relation to any matter, in relation to how a state institution or in our role as co-guarantor of the Good Friday Agreement in relation to how they've been treated. But I don't want to cut across any specific process. But other than to say this, that we as a government will continue to speak up for human rights, for a victim-centred approach to legacy, absolutely for the support of the rule of law. And we take very seriously our role as co-guarantor of the Good Friday Agreement, and I really look forward to having a conversation with the British government in July about how we can both work together in that constructive partnership approach that is so important to peace on this island and on these islands.
Agus I dús bara Guillaume Gatra Eamon Ryan Kibig hen ballach a Hewlin Shanish agus freshen ahanta so a horse than Mage Ibra Ridisha. Agus Bawatla Minish Filu Checht na Palestina agus an tar Brúdúl Marfach a tar Siúl agus a tá muidna I man cancha an seo. Agus rinnemar an kinne ceart an dara lá fihid den bhí seo caite nuair a thug mar aitheantas don stát, mar stát neamhsplach an Palestine. Agus í an cheiste níos cadíd na céimena eile agus tá prán le céimena eile. I'm going to return to the question of Palestine, where genocide continues as we sit here peacefully speaking in this Parliament. And I say that with the greatest of respect to the government of Israel and to the Jewish population, that they are carrying out a genocide. We took the right step on the 22nd of May in 2024 when we recognised Palestine. But for that decision to have meaning, we now need to take further steps. And clearly Israel and the army and the government is out of control. They simply know no bounds and they're not listening to anyone. And I say that in the context of the facts today. More than 37,202 Palestinians have been killed, with nearly 85,000 Palestinians injured. I also acknowledge that 1,200 Israelis have been reported killed and nearly 5,500 reported injured. 17,000 children are now known by a number of letters. Wounded child with no surviving family. 70,000 units have been destroyed. 1.7 million people in Gaza displaced. The facts are important. It's important to let them out in view of the propaganda and the narrative that's going out from an Israeli ambassador and Israeli spokespeople. The UN Food and Agricultural Organization has said that 1 million Gazans face death and starvation by next month, by mid-July. 100% suffer from trauma and depression. 8,000 children under 5 have received treatment for severe malnutrition. And I could go on with the amount of aid workers and journalists that have been killed. But what I want to focus on in my last few seconds is, Taoiseach, what steps are you now going to take to give a reality to the recognition of Palestine as an independent state? And the first one, of course, is to stop the travel of American soldiers and arms through Shannon. That's the most basic step we need to take. We need to end the dual export, the dual use goods, which have increased by tenfold in 1 year. Exports from this country for dual use. We need to enact the Occupied Territories Bill. And in relation to the EU-Israel Association Agreement, why haven't we acted on that and the humanitarian clause as a basic step, Taoiseach? As basic as inspecting the planes going through Shannon. They're basic steps if we're to give substance to the recognition that we gave a few weeks ago to Palestine.
Thank Deputy Connolly for raising this issue. I spoke yesterday to President Biden and spoke specifically on behalf of Ireland about the importance of an immediate ceasefire. The President agreed that there was a need for a two-state solution. I think he said that in his readout of the call. And my question to everybody is, what more can we do to bring about the circumstances where a ceasefire can be achieved? Because I genuinely believe the first thing that has to happen is there needs to be a cessation of violence. Because as recently as yesterday, the 17th of June, we saw as many as 17 Palestinians killed in Israeli strikes on a refugee camp in central Gaza. I'm aware of the reports of yet further strikes on refugee camps, and we need an immediate and a permanent ceasefire to create the environment in which we can work towards the two-state solution. And that's the first thing Ireland is continuing to do in every international fora, at every opportunity, with every world leader. And we did it again as recently as yesterday. I also welcome the publication of the report by the Independent International Commission of Inquiry on the occupied Palestinian territory, including East Jerusalem and Israel. And the report does assert that there have been grave violations of human rights and of international humanitarian law. And there has to be full accountability for all civilian deaths and for all crimes that have been committed. And we will continue to support, at a time when other countries haven't always, we will continue to support the International Criminal Court and the International Court of Justice, and we've done that through additional funding as well. Our position on the association agreement at an EU level remains clear. I articulated it to a number of European counterparts as recently again as yesterday, and I will continue to do it next week at the formal European Council. I believe that it is really unacceptable that a trade agreement that is in place that has human rights clauses hasn't been reviewed. That is the position of Ireland, it's the position of Spain, and we continue to try and grow support for that at an EU level. And I think there's been some encouraging signs of that recently with the Belgian presidency now calling an association agreement review meeting as well. In relation to dual-use goods, Ireland operates a robust framework for regulating the export of dual-use goods, and the Department of Enterprise, Trade and Employment is the national competent authority. All export licence applications are considered in criteria set out within the relevant dual-use regulations and in line with Ireland's international obligations, and we operate a rigorous export control system, and we will continue to do so as well. I think it's been extraordinary that in the last 24 or 48 hours we've seen Ireland's decision, along with Norway and Spain, to recognise the state of Palestine being used as some sort of peculiar justification, a pathetic justification really, for the illegal settlements in the West Bank and the determination of the government of Israel to do more in that space. And I think what that should tell us, Deputy Connolly, though, is that the recognition of the state of Palestine is not seen as something merely symbolic or inconsequential, but is actually seen as something quite significant in terms of speaking up and speaking out for the state of Palestine. So we continue to do all that we can in every fora that we can on the occupied territory. I'll come back in a moment. Sorry.
When you were speaking to President Biden yesterday, did you ask him to stop the export of arms that's responsible for the genocide in Palestine? Did you ask him to take action in relation to that? The previous Taoiseach wrote to van der Leyen back in February in relation to the EU-Israeli agreement. Nothing has happened since. Directly wrote to van der Leyen, no response, and yet this government and you are going to vote for van der Leyen. You're going to continue to support her. I understand Fianna Fáil have a little more sense and mightn't be supporting her election. But you're actually going to support van der Leyen, who stood shoulder to shoulder with Netanyahu, who's now the subject, along with his government, of the International Criminal Court inquiry into a plausible case of genocide. There's an arrest warrant sought, and we're still waiting on the answer whether the arrest warrant is going to be granted in relation to Netanyahu, amongst other people. And van der Leyen has stood shoulder to shoulder with him, has expressed no regret in relation to that, while arms from Europe, from our own country, Germany, from France, and from America, amongst other countries, are responsible for the genocide that's happening while we sit here and calmly and coolly talk. Taoiseach, talk is over. It is time to take action. The various bills that are going through the Dáil, one since 2018 from Senator Black, not followed. The dual purpose goods, if that's robust and rigorous, I really tremble if that's the same robust and rigorous inspection that's going on in Shannon in relation to inspection of planes.
Taoiseach, to conclude, please.
So I think when it comes to President von der Leyen, I think there's a serious misrepresentation of her view in this country by some. Some for political gain during the European elections. And I attended the European Council last night with 26 other Prime Ministers and Presidents, and I haven't heard in the ether any country within the European Union actively propose another name for President of the Commission. President von der Leyen hasn't gotten everything right, but President von der Leyen has shown leadership in relation to humanitarian aid, has shown leadership in relation to UNRWA, has clearly called for a ceasefire. And I think sometimes it's convenient to blame President von der Leyen for other things. It is a matter for member states of the European Union, to stand up and be counted when it comes to the association agreement. We have, Spain has, Belgium has made progress. So it's not a competency of the President of the Commission, it's of the member states. In relation to the arrest warrant, or any arrest warrant, this country will always comply with international courts in relation to these issues. And in relation to Shannon and other airports, no airport in Ireland or Irish sovereign airspace is being used to transport weapons to the conflict in the Middle East. In 2023 and to date this year, no application has been received, nor has any exemption been granted for the carriage of weapons on civil aircraft to Israel. And any such application, if received, would be refused.
That concludes Leaders' Questions for today and allows us to move to the order of business. And in accordance with Standing Order 35, I must now call on the Chief Whip, Mr. Hildegard Naughton, to move that the arrangements for the week's business be agreed to.
I move.
Is that agreed? Not agreed. All right. Deputy Bacik.
Yesterday you said the consensus was emerging among many EU leaders to back Commission President Ursula von der Leyen for a second term, and I listened carefully to your comments just now on this, and it will be a concerning development for people in Ireland. Notwithstanding what you've said about Ursula von der Leyen, she has not rowed back from her initial unqualified support for the Netanyahu regime as we see the genocidal death toll in Gaza rising. So I am asking that we might have a debate on her reappointment as Commission President in this House so that we can, I think, highlight and some transparency around the process to see who from Ireland will be backing her in this attempt to become Commission President for a second term.
Deputy Borg McLaughlin.
Thanks, Can Corler. Just in relation to the EU Migration and Asylum Pact, we had asked for as much time as possible for us to take whatever time is needed on this. It is a matter of serious concern in the opposition that while the government has granted more time, it will be scheduled to conclude tomorrow. It asks the government again to consider allowing this to take as much time as possible and to adjourn until Thursday or next week. So we clearly need more time in this Oireachtas to demonstrate that we've had the fullest debate, had the fullest opportunity before we vote on the matter.
Deputy Roisin Shortall.
Recall that as Minister for Health in 2017 you committed to introducing a statutory right to home care. In 2020 you said that the scheme was nearly ready and the new government would be introducing it. Here we are 4 years later and we're no nearer to having a statutory scheme for home care. The Minister Butler, admitted as much last week when she said that the nut of funding that scheme hadn't been cracked. Now, Taoiseach, this failure to follow through on that promise, the broken promise, has huge implications for the care of older people, as more and more older people are being forced into nursing homes because of the absence of such a scheme. Will you allow time this week to discuss the implications of that for a very large number of older people who have been let down by this government?
Thank you. Deputy McBarry.
The Women's Aid Annual Report is a chapter of horrors. 40,000 disclosures of abuse against women and children, the highest ever recorded since the charity's inception 50 years ago. It's noteworthy that 86% of abuse was committed by a current or former male intimate partner. Interesting too that 48% of women who reported to the Gardaí found the Gardaí to be unhelpful. That needs to be discussed. I propose that the Business Committee put this issue onto the Dáil schedule as soon as possible.
Deputy Dennis Naughton.
Ceann Comhairle, as you know, at the Business Committee last week, I forcefully put across the point of my opposition to the imposition of a guillotine this week. And I made the point that every member who wishes to speak on the Migration Pact should be and must be facilitated in doing that. Now, I've been in contact with your office, Taoiseach, and with the Chief Whip. I know additional time is being provided, and that's welcome. But I firmly believe, Taoiseach, that every single member that wishes to contribute on this must be facilitated. And if that happens, I won't oppose the moving of the debate today.
Deputy Matthew McGrath, finally.
Several weeks at the Business Committee, and the fact that the government deceitfully hid this pact until after the local European election, and now we're debating a red herring here because it's already adopted in Europe, we're told. You changed the wording of it, and we need ample time to discuss this. Indeed, you promised us, so did Taoiseach Micheál Martin, so did the Minister for Justice, that we would have ample time to debate this here in the floor of the Dáil. A pact that took 10 years in gestation in Europe, and we're going to dispense with a guillotine here after maybe 6.5 hours now. I think it's outrageous. We, on behalf of the rural independents, we're fundamentally opposed to it. We've been trying to get debates on this issue for almost 18 months here now, and the only party that group that are, and continue to do so, and think that this will be rushed now after, as I said, being hidden away from the people until after the election. You did the same with the referendum. You didn't divulge the Attorney General's advice. And we want to see the Attorney General's advice regarding to many issues, many aspects of this piece, of this pact. So we're fundamentally opposed to it.
Taoiseach?
Thanks very much. So firstly, in relation to Deputy Bacik's point, I mean, look, I'm very conscious, and again, I'm not sure this comes across always in our domestic debates here in relation to the European positions, but there's 4 posts being considered currently in Europe. The European Parliament President, the President of the Council, the President of the Commission and the High Representative for Foreign Affairs. And the different political groupings at a European level are involved in that, including your own group, the S&D. And I would just, based on the conversations that I've had yesterday, my understanding is the S&D are very actively involved in these discussions, and I've yet to see any sort of red flag or opposition be raised by the S&D to President von der Leyen at a European level. The European Council will meet again next Thursday and Friday, I think, where I hope the Council will be in a position to make a decision on a name to go to the Parliament, and then it will be up to each MEP, including our Irish MEPs, in a secret ballot, I believe, to vote yea or nay on whatever name gets sent there. I'm not sure in all truth whether the House will be able to facilitate a debate in advance of that. I have an openness to that and no difficulty with that. In relation to the issue of the Migration Pact, the EU Migration Pact, so look, I think there's some sensible suggestions here from Deputy Naughton, from others. I don't disagree with what Deputy McLaughlin said. There's no deceitfulness here going on. We did say we'd provide ample time on this. I think there's 8.5 hours scheduled tomorrow, from my recollection. And what we're clearly saying today in the Dáil, that if time is running out tomorrow on the EU migration debate, and if there are still people who've indicated that they wish to speak, the Whip will come back into the House and do a new business proposal on the floor to extend the time. So everyone who wants to speak, every member of Dáil Éireann who wishes to speak on the Pact will have the time to speak on the Pact. So let's clarify that. Anyone who wants to speak will have time to speak on the Pact. And I think that is the definition of ample time, that everybody will have an opportunity. On the issue of statutory home care, for that reason, I think it's unlikely there'd be an ability to have a debate on home care and the statutory home care scheme this week, but I am happy that we would facilitate a debate on that. It won't be this week because of the time we're passing over, but I am happy for that to be pursued. There's an update I can give you here on a lot of the good work that is going on, including the legislative piece recently receiving Cabinet approval, but let's schedule that debate for as soon as possible. And similarly on the Women's Aid report, no difficulty from our perspective on having a debate on the work of Cuan, the Women's Aid report and our zero tolerance strategy. Again, just the timing will need to be agreed by the Business Committee.
Thank you, Taoiseach. Are the proposed arrangements agreed to?
Not agreed.
Not agreed. Na Chuck de Tarhaven,
Do you want to speak?
And again, Neil.
Neil.
Stolen killing cash straight, but his questions carried. Tall.